For 60 years, the U.S. government has kept a closely guarded secret. Aliens have been walking among us, living in our neighborhoods, and interacting with us in our daily lives. They've shopped in the same stores, attended the same classes as our children, and lived seemingly normal human existences. With one exception, they do not belong here. This is like a Star Wars intro. Like, this is
Literally,
incredible.
yeah.
So millions arrived under the cover of darkness and embedded themselves directly into our society. Countless presidents, congressmen, and senior officials knew exactly what was happening. Instead of protecting American citizens, they chose to cover it up and accelerate the invasion, until one man finally had the courage to tell the truth. Bold, unapologetic, unafraid, President Trump was the first to call out the real danger aliens pose to every American family, every community, and the future of our nation. The truth is no longer out there. It is right here, right now.
We have chemical weapons deployed constantly, where we're seeing batons, where we're seeing tasers, where we're seeing pepper balls and tear gas. And it's important to be thinking ahead of time about how to prepare for that. Getting those street medic teams trained, being able to get the quality gear that you need, not just getting gas masks from Home Depot, but getting military grade gas masks like Mira gas masks, where you can actually be out there, especially if you are out there filming, and be able to stand in the tear gas and have full face protection and not have to worry about running out of the crowd, so we can be getting as much documentation as possible.
We're watching like propaganda play out in real time in a way that has been more effective than any other time in history.
These aliens are the millions of illegals who invaded our country under the cover of darkness. President Trump told the truth. The cover-up is over. Secure the border. Deport them all. What the fuck? Holy
And again,
shit.
you look at the map and it lists pretty much every country in the world. Like, it does not matter
Yeah.
the color of skin. It's just about US versus everyone else, trying to create that nationalistic ideology again, or identity again.
This is like, you got fucking Joseph Goebbels running the show here with propaganda. Like, holy shit. Welcome to Occupation Breakdown. I got a special episode here straight out of Alaska. I've got Lee Stedman with us today. Do you want to just kind of give a second about where you're at right now?
Yeah, I'm currently up in Haines, Alaska, in southeastern Alaska, working as a sea kayaking and alpine backpacking guide. Haven't started yet for the season, just been chilling up here, but it's definitely a transition from journalism.
Yeah, so Lee is coming straight from the library there. And we've got a time crunch before the library shuts, so I'm going to keep it moving here. But I'm just going to introduce Lee with a quick video here, and then we'll start the conversation.
From Alaska to everyone, just wanted to throw up a quick reminder that ICE activity is picking up across the U.S. right now. Like, obviously we had the whole situation that just went down at the Delaney Detention Center in New Jersey, but now ICE activity is picking up in Chicago, in the Twin Cities, at other places where hunger strikes have been happening. There's a likelihood that we're going to see an influx of agents sent there and more heightened security. Tom Homan just made the announcement that evidently they're going to be sending in a whole slew of agents to New York, more than we've ever seen before. It's likely a threat in response to the fact that so many people were booing Trump when he showed up at the game the other night, but nevertheless, like, there is a strong likelihood that they will follow through with this, because they want to go and target areas that are basically seen as strongholds against the Trump administration right now and federal law enforcement efforts under the ICE umbrella, and try to like weaken those places in order to be able to show their strength. So as we think about that, as we're heading into fall, when the Homeland Security Task Force, or the HSTF, is supposed to be launched, it's important to use this time that we have right now to build up our independent media networks, to build up our rapid response systems, to build up our mutual aid efforts, to be figuring out our funding sources to go and help make sure that people have the rent assistance that they need to be able to help them if their families are targeted by ICE operations, and otherwise being able to figure out how to structure ourselves within the community to not only be able to respond to the atrocities as they happen, but to be able to effectively sustain our efforts. It's important to think too, as you're preparing for everything that could potentially happen this fall, how to start preparing things in your own community. There's a high likelihood that we're going to see a whole slew of law enforcement come into play with the new interagency effort of the HSTF, as well as the partnerships with Geo Group, with Palantir, with other independent, basically private militias, surveillance companies, and organizations that are going to be partnering with the DHS as well as with the Trump administration, there's going to be a likelihood of seeing the exact same thing that happened in New Jersey and Chicago and the Twin Cities elsewhere across the country, where we have chemical weapons deployed constantly, where we're seeing batons, where we're seeing tasers, where we're seeing pepper balls and tear gas. And it's important to be thinking ahead of time about how to prepare for that. Getting those street medic teams trained, being able to get the quality gear that you need, not just getting gas masks from Home Depot, but getting military grade gas masks like Mira gas masks, where you can actually be out there, especially if you are out there filming, and be able to stand in the tear gas and have full face protection and not have to worry about running out of the crowd, so we can be getting as much documentation as possible. Start building street medic teams, start building independent media teams, start thinking through how you can go and build hyper-local neighborhood groups and start supporting people within your own networks as well as local businesses, and be able to prepare for response. In that sustained effort comes a need for recovery. So start thinking about getting support groups going, start thinking about organizing social workers, thinking about how to respond to the mental health crisis that'll probably come from whatever scenario happens, and to make sure to be out there at the polling locations, observing what's going on so we can protect our elections and make sure that they're safe, that they're secure, and that they're not tampered with.
Well, I was just writing a list of all the things there, and I've got like about 20 or so items that we really got to be working on. If this is your first time seeing Lee's been, at least as far as I know, I think I basically just saw you reporting on day-to-day ICE operations sometime early in the surge. So it's something that you just kind of became locally well known and famous for. But yeah, obviously today we want to talk more about that later. We don't have time for that. We really want to focus more on just kind of the predictions for the upcoming, year basically, as well as the HSTF task force. So do you want to just kind of talk about the HSTF task force a little bit? Do you want me to share the page here?
Yeah, honestly, sharing the page might be good. So the HSTF task force, I like to go and relate it back to if anyone watches like Daredevil, the TV show, especially after it's been like relaunched by Disney on Disney Plus. Like on there, they have the anti-vigilante task force, which is going after like superheroes and stuff in there, essentially like key figures who would otherwise represent resistance groups. And ironically, like the HSTF was announced back, I believe, in September 2025 for the first time. And then after several situations occurred in Minnesota that the Trump administration was able to basically exploit and use for propaganda to, again, frame the community as being quote unquote domestic terrorists. It was re-announced publicly with this website, the HSTF.gov. But essentially it's like, when we look at the umbrella of ICE operations, I feel like oftentimes people get stuck in this mindset that ICE operations means that the agents that you're seeing on the ground are just ICE, but it's not just ICE. Technically, it's an umbrella that exists under the Department of Homeland Security that is made up of ICE, ERO, HSI, CBP, BORTAC, FPS, and several other groups. And so HSTF is basically an expansion of that. And it's going to be a 20 to 30 plus like interagency like network with headquarters in all 50 states, as well as I believe US territories as well. And it's going to be a combination of US federal law enforcement agencies with surveillance companies and other private interest groups that they're working with right now. So like, for example, as we've been looking at what's been happening with Operation Metro Surge and Operation Metro Blitz and what's been going on at Delaney, we've been seeing groups like Geo Group, Core Civic, Palantir, all showing up in various capacities, whether they're the ones acting as security or running detention centers or working as like the surveillance networks, looking into what organizations exist on the ground, tracking resistance movements, looking at like who like ICE operations want to target when they're actually doing quote unquote like immigration enforcement and not just like essentially trying to incite fear within the community. So that way people who would otherwise be considered likely to be political opponents of the Trump administration are no longer involving themselves within trying to resist the Trump administration itself. So there's a lot of like assumptions that can be made about we're going to see with the HSTF, but I think the biggest concern that I know I have and the assumption that I can make is that if we're looking at parallel timelines between what the Trump administration is doing and what Nazi Germany did specifically, this basically sets up the possibility of an actual national paramilitary like police force to exist within the US to go after any kind of resistance groups that exist, whether they're journalists, academics, organizers, etc. So
Yeah, and one thing that just kind of popped in my head and I hadn't really realized until now was that is this a part of the broader reach to basically umbrella all these organizations together and just so they all have like the central intelligence systems because as far as like our history, there's always like fights between all these interagencies as far as communication, and there's no trust and all that stuff, and this kind of takes that away, which is pretty scary because there's a lot of corruption between agencies that is the reason why that exists in the first place.
yeah, well, it's even more terrifying too because I feel like people don't realize that there's like I think a little over 100 different federal law enforcement agencies. And like even just under ICE, we're only seeing like a handful of them, but there are so many others with very specific functions. So for them to be brought together in this effective umbrella with the intention, even listed somewhere on this website, I believe it's a little bit further down with their actual timeline, but like the launch of on the ground efforts by September and like actually having the infrastructure built up for that, like it's really concerning because yeah, I mean it's going from the theoretical of coordination between these different agencies to like straight up like they are coordinating and we're going to be very forward facing about it. And so I think how we go about seeing operations happen on the ground are going to drastically change, even more so than the timeline we saw in Minnesota, where they suddenly started shifting tactics and strategies and trying to blend in with the community and going undercover and whatever else to like much more rapidly expanded programs, which I don't even know exactly what we're going to see yet. I think we get like indications here or there, but like it's hard to anticipate like how much they have planned ahead right now, especially like when you're looking at the jump in that timeline from April to September. Like all we know is that this summer is going to be used to build up the infrastructure for whatever they're going to do starting September, probably through the rest of the midterm elections.
Yeah, and I was just gonna play stupid there, but it's like, what happens after September? It's this goddamn election. So,
Yeah.
and you know that, like Metro Surge, I know everybody thinks about it as Renee Good, and that was just the point. But you obviously know this was going on a long time before that. And to
Yeah.
build up that fear in that many people takes a time it takes some time, and it was, obviously they were there from the beginning of the year. But at some point I think it was like November is when it really, I think when Nick Shirley did his stupid video basically, and that's when, that prompted the initial surge there. But obviously it took some time to build that up before it was at full, like everybody was like, what the fuck, we're over this, and that was like most people. And then, once it happened with Renee Good, then it was like everybody was fully aware of it at that point. There's no way you could say you didn't know, you know. Um, but yeah, anyways, so basically we went through this. I mean, obviously this timeline is terrifying. We've
Right.
got
And it's
this.
only what they're telling us that they're intending on doing. It's not necessarily what they're actually doing either. So it's talk about disinformation and misinformation like circuits for like forever.
Yeah. And if I were just an average person reading this and I wasn't necessarily so informed, you might see some of these things and they might not see, it might seem like some rational, things here. Basically, if you read like some of the other things, it's like, oh, what are we here for? And it's, oh, we're here for narcotics and human trafficking. Nobody likes that, even though they're, the human traffickers right now. Weapons trafficking, even though we're the weapons traffickers right now. Financial crimes led by the people doing all the financial crimes right now. I mean, transnational gangs, you know, it's just ridiculous. This whole thing is, and then intelligence fusion. Oh, by the way, we're gonna put it all in Palantir. Like,
But that's the scary part of all of this is like when we look at the last presidential elections and we recognize the fact that like, somewhere around 80 million people voted for Trump. It's like that's still at least how many people are believing this information. It might have gone down by a certain percentage as people realize that Trump doesn't represent their values on the side of MAGA and conservatives. But nevertheless, like there's a lot of people that read this and they're stuck in their echo chambers of just the information that the Trump administration, their partners are feeding them, and think that 100% like this is accurate.
This
These
is just
people are
public
heroes. They're
safety.
coming into our communities. Exactly. And that's where it gets scary because like when you jump into independent media, then even having conversations like this, like, even if we give factual information that is backed up with a slew of evidence that counters, like, whatever is on this website, people won't understand it. They won't have like, the ability to pick it apart and disseminate that information and determine what's factual and what's not, because all they've been fed is a line of information that makes them believe that everything on the HSTF website is factual, which is even more concerning than when you couple the HSTF.gov website with the new White House launched Aliens.gov website, which is not about UFO and conspiracies and stuff. It's about framing
I
immigration
wish.
enforcement as getting, I know, right? Immigration enforcement as getting rid of illegal aliens. And they actually have a map of where the federal government is claiming that they're doing all the ICE operations and the bubbles
What's
of the
that one?
percentage that they're targeting. It's aliens.gov. Unfortunately, it forces you to have to slowly go through a whole line of disinformation that slowly pops up on the screen before you get to like the key point in
Oh
it
my
that I would want to
God.
like maps at the very bottom, which is the GIS map of where they're conducting operations from the federal government's like side of things.
Oh my fucking Christ.
It's horrifying, right? I feel like not
Oh
enough
my
people have seen
fucking
this.
Christ.
Unfortunately, this is real. This is .gov.
Holy shit. Alien. Oh my Lord.
And they're totally
This
playing
is
into the fact of like all the UFO releases and everything too. So they're hyping people up and then they drop this and then people they might not even think it's real, but they will be hyped up because they're playing into the fad that exists. It's insane.
So yeah, so for anybody just listening, so they walk among us. For 60 years, the US government has kept a closely guarded secret. Aliens have been walking among us, living in our neighborhoods, and interacting with us in our daily lives. They've shopped in the same stores, attended the same classes as our children, and lived seemingly normal human existences. With one exception, they do not belong here. This is like a Star Wars intro. Like, this is
Literally. Yeah.
incredible. So, millions arrived under the cover of darkness and embedded themselves directly into our society. Countless presidents, congressmen, and senior officials knew exactly what was happening. Instead of protecting American citizens, they chose to cover it up and accelerate the invasion until one man finally had the courage to tell the truth. Bold, unapologetic, unafraid, President Trump was the first to call out the real danger aliens pose to every American family, every community, and the future of our nation. The truth is no longer out there. It is right here, right now. Holy shit.
And then it gets
I've
even more
seen.
interesting because they have this constant counter of the number of quote unquote encounters they have. And then there's the alien arrest map, which is the actual thing that is really important to break down because when you look at the criminal charges in the countries of origin that exist on there, they're not just listing like Black, Brown, Asian Pacific Islander, etc. groups. They are listing like Ireland, France, Germany, etc. Which is when you start to break that down, you realize the fact that they are carbon copying what Hitler did in Nazi Germany with framing the Jewish population as being basically stereotyped as an association with evil to create like this juxtaposition between us and them and to create a common enemy. And because they're trying to like basically enforce this idea of extreme nationalism in the US again, just like what happened in Nazi Germany, they have to be more creative with it. So they're framing anyone that would be an immigrant or refugee or outside of our borders as being the enemy. So that way there is a national identity that they could perpetuate and then use that to feed back into the cult of MAGA. It's it's unfortunately both really evil and ingenious marketing and propaganda that's just like fully in effect. And it's problematic because again, like 80 million people vote for Trump in the last election, which means at least 80 million people are believing this information. And just by looking at these visuals and seeing like the Star Wars rendition of the aliens.gov, quote unquote.
This is just horrifying.
Yeah.
I was not expecting this today. So no, thanks for showing me, but holy Holy
You're
shit.
welcome. Welcome to our one of our many new .gov websites that I've launched in the last month. There are more that we could go
My
into.
lord. And we didn't even get through the HSTF. Holy shit. If you've witnessed an alien abduction, do not be alarmed. Oh my God. If you've witnessed an alien abduction, do not be alarmed. The alien is in good hands. We will take care of it and return it safely to its place of origin. Holy shit. What the fuck?
Fully dehumanizing, right?
Dude, and they're not even bringing people back to their place of origin. Even if you were to like put that at its like word, like, oh my God. They're like putting people, because one of the other things that they said is that um they're like basically like, hey, we're giving you the option to self-deport and do all this stuff. If we happen to catch you before that, your ass is going into our labor camp. Like, you're not
Yeah.
going back home. You might go back
Quote
home if
unquote
we don't like
labor
you.
camp. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess concentration camp. But no, I was just saying that. I meant like, but Jesus Christ. But
No, but I mean that's part of the propaganda, right? It's like you will be put into this detention center and then you will be removed from the country unless you do the right thing and you quote unquote deport yourself. But like again, like all of this feeds back to this idea of trying to create like a nationalistic identity that they can perpetuate to make as much of the population hate anyone that would not be considered to be again, quote unquote, like an American citizen. So then you couple that with another website that now exists on whitehouse.gov, which is a subsection called Trump Accounts, which is focused on, which is trumpaccounts.gov, which is focused on giving families $1,000 for every child they have between late 2025 and 2028, basically trying to increase the American population. Again, like feeding back into that nationalistic ideology of the US versus everyone else.
there's an app.
There's an app for it. Yeah.
Holy shit. What the fuck? Okay, because what is it? And there was that was an actual thing they did in Nazi Germany where it was like they gave people, if you had over like 6 kids or something, they were like national heroes and they would like make them like, stars and shit like that and pay them money, and yeah, it was a big deal.
And that's basically what's happening here. I mean, that first bullet point right underneath the graphic, get $1,000 for every American child born between January 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2028.
There's a lot of people that are probably pissed. They're like, I want that money.
No, I was reading comments on it. I was looking at Reddit forums. People are actually very excited about this. They're like, if you don't have to pay into it and it's provided by the government, take it, allow it to grow until your kid's 18 and then take it out. But there's no way in hell that this isn't part of some Ponzi scheme that also feeds back into additional like financial streams for Trump and his family as well. And that's what
Yeah,
makes
or
it even easier and
whoever's getting all the interest or whatever.
right.
Holy shit.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Like
Yeah,
interesting in a very like disgusting way, but we're watching like propaganda play out in real time in a way that has been more effective than any other time in history.
yeah. And sorry to go back to this, but I mean, okay, so
Yeah.
you have the report the suspicious alien tip line. I'm hesitant to click that, but and then they weren't little green men. These aliens are the millions of illegals who invaded our country under the cover of darkness. President Trump told the truth. The cover up is over. Secure the border, deport them all. What the fuck? Holy
And again,
shit.
you look at the map and it lists pretty much every country in the world. Like it does not matter
Yeah.
the color of skin. It's just about US versus everyone else, trying to create that nationalistic ideology again or identity again.
This is horrific. I mean, and they make this look like it's like a disease map or something. Like the
Like a COVID
actual,
map,
yeah,
ironically,
this
right?
this is exactly what that looks like to me. Um, so the way that they're doing this is like you got fucking Joseph Goebbels running the show here with propaganda like holy shit. Yeah, so let's go back to this one. And yeah, so President Trump, quote, for the first time, law enforcement will have a permanent task force in every state and territory nationwide. So yeah, we've got 8,500 plus agents and analysts, 440 state and local agencies, and over 52 states, territories covered. And then, so yeah, it shows basically 20 plus federal agencies and hundreds of state and local international partners. Probably one partner internationally that I'm sure we could think of that is
Yep.
fusing with
Most likely.
our military intelligence right now, I'm imagining. See, what is intelligence fusions operations? I wonder if that's like where they would consider going after,
Yeah. And that's
organizers and stuff
where
like that.
And I remember there being some public comments made when they were re-announcing it that made me think that they were going to be going after resistance circles, especially in the press conferences leading up to the one where they re-announced the HSTF, they were talking a lot about. So there was that whole situation that went down over at the local federal building with activists who were on the ground there, as well as Savannah from TPUSA, which launched a whole like FBI investigation and disinformation campaigns coming from the Trump administration, framing again protesters on the ground as being quote unquote domestic terrorists. Along the lines of the narrative that they were putting out at that time was the idea of like once again circulating back to this idea that we need to go after the circles that are funding these domestic terrorist groups or these like resistance efforts, these activists, these paid activist groups, whatever, like going after their funding sources, going after their partners, basically framing everything as though it's like a infiltration of the US and like the fact that they need to counter it. So like the HSTF was re-announced like right after a series of press conferences where they started talking about these resistance circles and how they're all connected and how they're being funded by private interest groups, basically taking the exact same thing that's happening with the Trump administration, but warping it to make it seem like that is what the collective total of people between journalists and academics and lawyers and organizers, et cetera, who are on the ground resisting what's happening in a variety of different ways as being the exact thing that we're fighting against. And so that's where it becomes concerning, because if that narrative leads into the HSTF and then the HSTF website launches like this, and while everyone is distracted with what was happening with the hunger strikes over at Delaney and pulling attention away from like the resurgence of ICE operations around the rest of the country, that basically acted as like the perfect storm for the Trump administration to distract everyone from the Secure America Act that just passed and was signed in on June 10th, which has now put $70 billion in funding towards ICE operations and the DHS through the end of Trump's presidency, and actually, I believe, through the end of 2029. And so now there's an additional $70 billion that is being flooded into ICE operations and the various federal agencies that make it up. And it's
Where
broken
we at
down
like 240 billion total now.
something
I think
like
it
that.
wasn't 170 originally, so that's yeah.
Yeah. And now it's another 70 billion. I wouldn't be surprised if they tack on a few more in there as well while they still have
Before the midterms.
The midterms, which again, like we can get into the midterm talks and like the predictions as what's going to happen there too, because I feel like all of it is ultimately connected, but the midterm elections are not the thing that is the most important. It's one stepping stone in the process of basically creating the HSTF, creating independent like funding sources and access to natural resources with the targeting of like Iran and Gaza and Cuba and Venezuela and Colombia and going after like the gates of the Arctic up in Alaska and like really perpetuating like open pit mining and oil pipelines and stuff. Like they're creating their funding source, they're creating the nationalistic identity, they're creating the paramilitary force under the HSTF, which basically parallels like the SS. And then they move into creating the assumption of like wherever ICE operations take place during the midterm elections, like they don't even need to have them at the polls. They could just exist within those states, and through psychological warfare and the association of ICE operations with the traumatic experiences that have happened previously in the year, suddenly a ton of people don't want to leave their houses or go to work or go to the polls because they're scared. And then people are responding. So then organizers, activists, journalists, et cetera, also don't make it to the polls, which then potentially gives them ultimately the opportunity to get people into office without any HSTF or other federal agencies actually having to be physically located at polling locations, which allows them to maintain their narrative while also doing the exact thing that we're predicting is going to happen with the midterm election. And that's the
Yeah.
craziest part of this year.
Yeah. I do have one thing to add here, and I think there's one short little man that we forgot to add to this conversation.
Oh,
So
yeah,
let me add something here.
the man who needs a step stool.
See if it.
I don't know about you, but it's been a long day for me. Watching the footage coming in from New Jersey has honestly been really hard on me. And if you aren't aware, Greg Bovino has now flown in. And I want to make a note on that because I feel like for a lot of people, it just looks like Greg Bovino being an agitator coming in because he wants violence. It has been a theory of mine for basically since he was forced into retirement and left Minnesota, that honestly I don't think Greg Bovino was ever removed from anything. I think Greg Bovino is part of the orchestrating team behind the scenes. He might not be at the very top, which is the collective think tanks that are working behind orchestrating everything that's happening with our federal government right now, but he's definitely not low level in the hierarchy. He's up there. He knew exactly what he was doing in Minnesota. He knew how to manufacture events for press. He had literal cameramen on the ground that would follow him around everywhere, knowing exactly what to get footage of at any given point in time in order to form perfect disinformation. He is highly strategic, and I think the forced retirement of Bovino after the bad publicity in Minnesota was entirely to remove him from, the public-facing scope. But I think he's still largely been a part of discussions and operations behind the scene. And so for him to fly into New Jersey right now, I want to put an air of caution out there for everyone. I think he's purposely going to try to escalate things. I think that he knows he has a plan and exactly what he wants to go and create and have happen out there, and I feel like he's working with others behind the scenes with the intention of making that happen. He's not just going there to be another one of those content creators like Jake Lang or Cam Higbee or Savannah from TPUSA that is trying to get good footage to put up or to build his own platform. Bovino doesn't really have much of a platform. I think he's going out there because he wants to escalate things. I think what failed in Minnesota with the possibility of creating a volatile situation to move towards the Insurrection Act or to move towards the justification of more funding and resources and hiring capabilities for the DHS umbrella, especially working towards the HSTF now, failed. But New Jersey is presenting the perfect opportunity for them to try to replicate that. So my assumption, or based on speculation, I would assume that in the next 24 hours he's going to make an appearance and probably make an appearance at night at some point. He's going to try to escalate things. He's going to try to get in people's faces. He's going to try to help pick out people from the crowd. And it is on everyone out there to not give in to what they want to do, because if they are working towards creating that volatile situation, they're going to try to do whatever they can to go and get things to be violent. And we can't allow them to do that.
So I actually didn't see him there at all. So not a huge deal,
Yeah.
but I'm just curious kind of what thoughts you have on this situation with Greg and, his continued presence.
Yeah. So first off, for anyone that's watched that video, I apologize. I didn't edit the captions at all. So Greg Bovino's name is written out at a lot of different places there. And also I was extremely tired when I made that video because I've been driving all day. That's hypercritical of myself because I could tell, like, watching that, how tired I was. Nevertheless, I was honestly surprised that I never saw Greg Bovino actually make an entrance on the ground because he allegedly arrived at the airport. Everyone was waiting for him. Independent media was reporting that he was going to arrive, and then it just went silent. And then the next thing that you see is that Greg Bovino is starting some kind of online campaign for the possibility of running his own presidential campaign going into 2028, which is absolutely absurd.
Bonkers.
But that's what he's doing now. I don't remember if it was on his X account or if it was on Truth Social, but he did announce that, people keep telling me I should run for president. And you know what? If that's the best way in order to stop immigrants from coming into our country and stop the illegal activity, then I will do it, essentially, to paraphrase. And so, honestly, I was surprised. I still, for the most part, think that Greg Bovino has definitely been involved behind the scenes and a lot more.
Yeah.
I think him, Holman, and others, they're moving them around, but they're not separated from anything. They're just trying to pull them from the public because they're wild cards. But that that specific indicator that he didn't actually show up on the ground and suddenly is talking about running his own presidential campaign makes me wonder if there was a follow-up that happened when he actually arrived in New Jersey that then shifted what his plans were. It's hard to know, but that honestly caught me off guard because I was under the assumption Bavino was either going to come out there and be reaccepted into the arms of the IC umbrella, or would be acting as like one of the content creators like Cam Igby or Lang or any of the
Showing up
other.
there, yeah.
Yeah, and just
Can you
try to,
imagine him just showing up and just being there like as a civilian?
you want to be able to see him through the crowd, you know? I've been saying at the end of some of my videos,
Get him
like,
some
please
stilts.
get this man a step stool. Yeah.
Well, if he became president, we would be definitely in a new Napoleon situation. I mean, that man is like he is very short and he is very angry. So I
Yeah.
could only imagine with the full power of the military what that guy would be capable of. But I can't imagine him being popular enough that anybody actually likes him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one last video here because just to make sure we get off on time. So obviously there's, like we said, Delaney is just, it's obviously a very serious thing. So it's not to say
Yeah.
it's not important, but it is also kind of, it is distracting us from other big things that are happening. And so obviously we had Emily go all the way out to Delaney and then come back after and immediately stop here.
This is the Appleton detention facility that's being turned into an ICE concentration camp. I'm currently standing on Fairgrounds. It borders up against the Appleton Fairgrounds.
So we got some more problems coming our way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think that while everyone has been distracted with Delaney and other situations that are occurring across the country, the Trump administration, effectively the DHS, have been making moves to start ramping up activity in New Jersey, in New York, in Illinois, in Minnesota, elsewhere, and are utilizing that $70 billion in addition to the other money they already had allocated towards ICE operations to start building up infrastructure in anticipation of fall. And that includes the Appleton Detention Center, which is right just west. And the goal behind that, from what inside sources are saying, is that it's basically going to be the major hub for like 5 Midwest states where if they, abduct anyone in there, like that's basically where they're going to be taken, is the Appleton Detention Center. And 1,600 beds doesn't seem like a lot, but the thing that's important to note is that they're overcrowding all the detention centers. Like it referenced it in the video, but like the largest detention center right now is the East Montana camp in Texas, which is known for its horrific treatment and like lack of access to water and people being sick and like just sheer lack of resources that exist there. So 1,600 is much larger than Delaney. And like the conditions are already bad enough in Delaney. To think about the fact that this is going to be right outside the Twin Cities likely means that this is both a political move to try to once again, in a sense, to make Minnesota feel lesser than the Trump administration through like essentially this political move of like, okay, Operation Metro Surge is quote unquote over, but we're going to put the detention center right next to the Twin Cities and also make Minnesota like the hub for where everyone is going to be detained. I think it's again meant to try to weaken Minnesota politically while at the same time like reinforcing the idea of like, you all didn't win. We are still here, from the Trump administration narrative, at least. So it's problematic. It's bad. This is going to be a very large detention center. It sounds like there's only a few ICE vehicles that have been spotted over there so far. I was actually just on a call talking about this, but there's a lot of concern that specifically rural areas are going to be targeted at an escalated rate, and that's where they're going to be held. Like we look at what just happened in Bemidji a couple days ago, where like 25 workers were taken from their job sites in the early morning hours and essentially disappeared from there, including some indigenous members of the community. So it's hard to know exactly what the timeline is for Appleton. But I mean, theoretically, like if we're looking at this new $70 billion funding bill that went through on June 10th, in addition to like the timeline leading up to the HSTF, I would assume just like every other detention center, they're trying to have it operational by the fall. So
Yeah, hold on. I have one more video here.
Whipple building, and right over here is where they're keeping this huge lot of vehicles that we see received at Whipple. And then they end up over here on the National Guard Air Base for who knows what.
yeah, so all those vehicles, the Chevy Tahoes, and I believe there are a few other types of SUVs that are over there now. Like they've been bringing those in for the last several months to Minnesota. They'll bring them into the Whipple parking lot that was gated off, and then they'll move them over to the Army Reserve Base that's just west of the building across the road. That's technically on federal property, so none of us can get over there. But they've loaded up in what looks like now probably around 200 black SUVs that are over there. So far, they haven't been utilized for anything that we know of, but I would say, again, with the likelihood of the funding bill plus the HSTF plus the other detention centers that are being built up, these will either likely be distributed to different cities across the country to aid in ICE operations, or they're going to be utilized in Minnesota once the Appleton Detention Center is operational, and then probably be spread throughout the Midwest specifically for ICE operations. So they haven't been moved over to the Appleton location yet, but that is something that a lot of people on the ground are watching at the moment, because the moment that happens, like, then there's definitely a reason to be concerned, because that means movement is starting in that area and we're probably going to see escalation once again.
So yeah, basically, I just want to give you one more minute here, or a couple more minutes here, to kind of talk about community action needs. You listed in that original video there. Obviously, we need to organize make sure we continue organizing and building up those groups in our community. We need to be working on independent media connections. Thanks for talking with me today as well. Build up our rapid response groups, our mutual aid network. We need to figure out ways to sustain them. And this is something that I saw actually something for as well, but doing civil preparedness, survival preparation, talking about how do we sustain mental health, and doing polling protection, and then also watching the polls, things like that. So what kind of thoughts do you have on that?
There's a lot of different ways that we can go and prepare in our communities. I think Minnesota acted as the perfect framework for what an incredibly effective structure is for responding to crisis, regardless of if that's, in the midst of BLM, or if that's in the midst of ICE operations, of having mutual aid set up, coordinating between the different mutual aid groups that exist, having rapid response systems set up, both by region as well as like hyper local in your neighborhood, like, which means knowing all of your neighbors and individually vetting them so you all know each other and know that anyone in that network belongs to that neighborhood. Working to start training yourself. Like if you have a background in journalism, or you have a background in research or private investigation, or maybe you're just someone that really wants to like stick to the facts and get the information out there, you're a good communicator, like start practicing with your phone, get some lavalier mics, practice recording information and trying to communicate it, and make sure that you're fact checking things. So that way we're putting out accurate information to the public, so that way people can prepare themselves. Like essentially there's a lot of different skills and expertises that we all come from, or areas of passion we come from, connecting based on those things and starting to build networks around them, building networks between legal, building networks between social workers, therapists, healers, etc., building networks between organizers and organizing communities, rural and urban, building connections between, whatever. Like once you can start doing that, you can start thinking through, what do we have? What don't we have? And now how can we coordinate between these different groups? And through that, effectively, we can set up structures that allow us to not only be able to respond to crisis, but to be able to prepare and anticipate what we need to do when that time comes. And so, basis of everything is start talking to people around you. And if you think that you know a way that you can get involved and help others, try, experiment. Don't be scared to like get involved and do things, because now up till September is our time to start preparing and experimenting and seeing what each of us can do as individuals and what we can do collectively as a community.
So in your video earlier, you really focused on getting the actual PPE, like
Yeah.
military grade, and talking about stuff like that. I think that's a conversation that a lot of people are uneasy about really broaching into. Obviously, I've seen many videos of you cleaning your eyes out after getting tear gas.
I'm really bad about wearing my gas mask.
Yeah. So what are your kind of thoughts on that? I know a lot of people are not really ready to break into that territory yet.
I think whether we want to believe in the possibility of it or not, there is the realm of possibility where things become violent within our country. And even if they don't, like there's already the use of chemical weapons, of LRAD, which is an long-range acoustic device. There are water cannons. There are, like, as we saw in Delaney, like federal agents are starting to use batons and tasers pretty much indiscriminately. Like we need to be able to protect ourselves. It's important to think not only of acquiring the things that allow you to go and repair, including like, for instance, like medical skills are really helpful in these scenarios, but like having quality like protection is really important. So like a lot of people in Operation Metro Surge, Metro Blitz, Delaney, like were wearing gas masks that are essentially from Home Depot that are not meant for tear gas. Like mirror gas masks are what a lot of independent media were using in Operation Metro Surge because they provide full face coverings. They protect your eyes from potentially getting shot out. They allow you to be able to stand there in tear gas and not have to worry about leaving the scenario because they're so effective at sealing around your face. Like, it is important to be thinking about investing in these things if you want to be involved on the ground. Not everyone needs to be involved on the ground. There's other ways to get involved. Again, street medics, mutual aid, independent media doesn't necessarily need to be on the ground reporting. It can be investigative research. But like if you are on the ground, if you are at these protests, if you are trying to record, taking part in them, it's important to be able to protect yourself because physical harm is definitely a possibility, and even more so a probability at this point with the level of violence that it continues to be perpetuated by local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies.
Yeah. And under the state patrol in New Jersey,
Yeah.
they rounded them all up and then they said, "Hey, if you're media, you got one chance to get the fuck out of here. We're going to move you all the way down here and we're going to hide you behind a bus while we beat the shit out of these people and arrest every single last one of them."
And then you can report on the aftermath where no one
Yeah.
is anymore because we've arrested them all.
Yeah. So that was our first, that was after they actually, to be fair, those people were in the First Amendment zone. They came in and they fucking just started beating the shit out of them regardless. So even in the First Amendment zone that they created, nope, not allowed.
At some
So
point, we need to expand into the First Amendment zone and talk more about that too, because like talk about
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that's all. These are all just appalling ideas that we are just comfortable with at this point, which is just insane.
Yeah.
So we got 5 minutes here. Any last thoughts?
There's a lot that's going to happen this year. There's a lot of conversations that I think are worth having publicly. I would love to have more conversations with you. I think that this is a great way in order for more people in the community to be able to interact and like get an understanding of what's going on right now. The most important thing right now is like start learning, start paying attention, don't don't ignore what's happening. It's really, really uncomfortable to have to expose yourself to what's happening, and obsessing yourself, like doom scrolling and everything, will definitely shut you down and lead to depression and burnout and everything else. We don't want that either. But effectively, we can't pretend like what's happening right now in our country isn't happening. And it's important to remember that we are our country, our community, our citizens, our neighbors. Like that is what makes up America. Like no matter what the history is here, like we are the country. And right now, our federal government is falling into corruption. And the only way we respond is by both paying attention and showing up, not just to protests, but for each other every single day, and not ignoring the crises that happen around us. And so, again, like whatever gets you interested in being involved, whatever unique skills or passions or experiences that you have, figure out how to apply them, figure out how to bring them to the table, make it happen.
So Lee, how could people find you, find your work, support you financially, whatever?
Yeah, you can. I mostly post on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on Instagram under ghost_Lee19. On Facebook, it's just my actual name, which is Lee Stedman. If you want to donate to me and help me with my work, everything that I do is from crowdfunded resources from the community. So my Venmo is listed on my LinkedIn, on my Instagram. I also have a LinkedIn too, if you want to look at that.
Just send me that and I'll link it in there as
Cool.
well. Perfect. And then for myself as well, if you want to find my work, I do, just political posting, shit posting and stuff under DissentDad. It's at DissentDad. And then this show is at Occupation Breakdown. Basically, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, all that shit. So find me at any one of those places. And same thing, anything I do here is basically just funded by myself. At DissentDad at Venmo, and buy me a coffee. But thank you so much, Lee, for coming in today. And
Thank you.
I'm going to share it with everybody. Moment of Zen.
I don't know who's watching this right now, and I don't know if you know who I am, and honestly, I don't care if you get to know who I am or not. That doesn't matter. I want you to stop for a minute, because I know right now it's so easy for anyone across this world to feel so overwhelmed by the weight of everything that's happening, whether it's stuff in your own life with financial anxiety or mental health struggles, or it's the politics of what's happening in your country or your community and the impacts of systems of oppression, whether it take the form of racism or sexism or transphobia or whatever else. And it's so easy to get lost in despair and to think that the world is an awful place and filled with suffering, and to forget about how beautiful community and the planet can actually be. And I just want to stop for a second because, you know, for those of you that don't know who I am, I was a journalist on the ground during Operation Metro Surge, and there's a lot that happened very quickly. And what got me through it was imagining being back in this place again, this place that for me feels absolutely otherworldly. And if you ever feel hopeless, if you ever feel like the world is just too heavy, I want you to imagine this place. I wish I could take you all here. I wish I could pay for all of you to have the opportunity to come here, and I can't, but I can at least show this to you. And every single time you feel lost, I want you to remember this spot. That's what got me through Operation Metro Surge. That's what got me through the last year of my life, was being able to come back to the beauty of this place, whether it was in my memory or in person. I just want to share that with all of you.